I'm Commander Ken Enticknap, and during the Falklands conflict I was on board HMS Ardent. We knew that we were being targeted. There was a huge explosion and the ship shook. The lights went out, water started pouring in. I shouted, "Go!" I knew that there were injuries up top and I was knocked unconscious and was trapped. Am I going to survive this? I didn't want to die. I was only 28 years old, I think. I joined the Navy in 1970 as an artificer apprentice. I worked all the way up to Chief Pettty Officer. And in 1982 I was aboard HMS Ardent as one of the section chiefs. And my action station, I was the chief in charge of the after damage control. I was pretty familiar with the ship, familiar with the routines, and we were a pretty practiced bunch of people. Ardent was late going down. We didn't sail with the task force because we'd been in some rough weather in the February time, and we'd caused some damage which had to be fixed in Devonport. So we were a few weeks late going down. Of course, always watching the news of how the situation was developing. And every hour you get an update of what's happening around the world. We were always rushing back to the mess to listen to the news. I don't know if you know that Lily Bolero is the theme tune, and every time I hear that, you get tingles up your spine. So we were constantly aware of what's going on. We were all recalled off Easter leave early in order to start manning up, ready to go down south and catch up with the task force. Nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants to go to war. We want to have peaceful outcomes to all of the conflicts that start. And we thought that a show of force would be sufficient enough to back the Argentine people down. We were issued with these dog tags. They're fibre. And on one set you have your blood group and your name, and the other you have your rank and your religion. And on the other set you have the size of your CB suits, or chemical suits. And you got a piece of string, but a hairy string, and you dangled that round your neck. The other ones had a shorter piece of string which goes around your toe if you end up as a corpse. Ardent was the first ship to go in between the two islands. We went past the entrance to Count St Cloud's Water, and our role was to set up a gun line in Falkland Sound and to keep the aircraft on the ground at Goose Green. We had to wait for the special forces to get in their positions to give us the call for fire. That was a bit of a long wait, but when it came we were a bit relieved that we were actually doing something at long last. And the gun started bombarding the shore, and we did that for most of the day. After we'd finished the bombardment, we were told to move further out into the Sound, and we knew then that we were going to be a decoy out there. So we were in for it, yeah. I think the seminal moment was when Sheffield was hit, and you realised then that it was for real. I remember the first lieutenant coming down. He was very quite pale, and he said, "Just seen them," he said. "Big green things." And we had a bomb either side of the ship that hadn't exploded at that time, so we knew that we were being targeted. And we knew then that we were going to go into some sort of action. It's that point when you start thinking about yourself. And certainly as a person in charge of a group of people, and they were all looking at me to lead them. I think that reconciliation with what I had to do helped me later on in the day. So you have all these things. People write their letters home, their final letter home, and you start thinking about that sort of thing. But all the time doing that, you are conscious that you have a job to do. You've got to do it well. You've got a commitment to the ship. All the time we were being told to take cover as aircraft came in. I knew that the call to take cover at this time was a little bit more dire because of the intonation on the Officer of the Watch's call across the tannoy. There was a huge explosion, and the ship shook, and the lights went out, water started pouring in, and the ship gradually moved over, heeled over to starboard. As soon as the bang went, I shouted, "Go!" And luckily everybody did. What had happened, the bomb had gone off in the hangar. There were people up there fighting the fire that was in the hangar. I think by that time the helicopter had been blown overboard and there was some serious injuries up there. I didn't at that time know there were any fatalities. I could see some people with field dressings around their heads and their arms and things. So I knew people had been injured. I was sufficiently trained to get the priorities right. And in many ways, you're secretly grateful to do something. You're still pretty frightened. You're not just pretty, very frightened, and you don't want to do anything wrong, but you see the people around you, and it's good in yourself that you're directing them to do the right thing. So I think that was that's how I dealt with it. I can remember saying, "Come on, Kenny, you've done the Pettty Officer's leadership course. You know, where's that extra 10% that you were taught to give in PLOC?" So at that time, I thought we were going to get the ship back operating again. That was my sole aim. We had to get the ship fighting again. Has the propulsion system been incapacitated? Can we steer the ship? All these things come into mind in how you have to address them. After the second bomb had gone off, and I was knocked unconscious and was trapped, unable to move, pinned down by something which crossed my back. And I could see that I was injured. I could feel that I was injured. We're having a lot of difficulty breathing. I don't think I really thought about must get this ship back working again. I thought, how can I save myself? And you realise that perhaps the ship isn't going to get back into a fighting condition because of the amount of devastation that you can feel around you. When I came to, I saw that my hand was all mangled up. I thought, oh, never mind, they can sew fingers and things back on these days. I couldn't see so well because of the mess up that was happening up here. I had a big cut here. I was feeling a bit groggy. And then I tried to get up and crawl away, but I couldn't. You try again, still can't do it. And you assess now, what do I do? Try harder. That extra 10% I was talking about, try harder. I still couldn't get out. At this time, the compartment is filled with thick, black, acrid smoke and starting to have difficulty breathing. At that point, you start thinking, oh, how am I going to get out? Am I going to survive this? Am I going to die? I certainly thought about Mrs. and the baby. You think, God, my wife is home. She's 5 months pregnant with my first child. Now, I want to go home. I need to see. I want to be there. So you try harder. But luckily then I heard somebody coming across the dining room. He stopped at me and he said, "Are you all right, Chief?" So I'll get this off my back and we'll get out of here. And then we grabbed hold of each other and we tried to go forward, but we couldn't get over the debris that was there. We couldn't see it, couldn't feel it, So we moved into the middle of the dining room and we just cuddled each other, thinking, what do I do now? What happens now? You don't say anything to each other, you just grab hold of each other tighter. And then we got a waft of fresh air. And then I could see the flames of the fire, and behind the fire, fresh air. So clearly the ship's side had been blown away. At that moment, I thought, we can survive this. We're getting some air. The after door wasn't there. There was a hole in the bulkhead. There was a lot of mangled mess over the top of it, but there was a gap underneath it. It must have been 18 inches wide. Neither of us would have got over it. We'd have cut ourselves to bits in the debris. So I said, look, we'll get underneath there. We'll get through there. And he says, we'll not get through there, Chief. So I said, being a leader, I said, follow me. So we scrambled underneath this 182 winch and got ourselves into the open air. And we put our life jackets on and jumped in the water. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening when they finally abandoned ship. We didn't have time to put our once-only suits on, and that we were in there just in overalls. That was giving us a chance to live, how did Rick Jolly said, out of the frying pan into the freezer, is how he described it. Then the helicopter came over, an old Wessex, and chap came out of the winchman came down, picked John Dillon out of the water, and came back for me. The relief came when I was flopped on the deck of the Wessex, and I heard Commander Jolly say, get these people to Canberra quick. I went out cold at that point. I came to in the Canberra. I was wrapped in blankets, no clothes, my head and arms and things covered in field dressings, and had a lady lying next to me. I thought, is this heaven? I realised later on that they were under attack as well and all taken cover, and the lady was somebody that worked in the laundry there, had come out and worked as an orderly in the ward. And then slowly we were transferred to the ward. People started coming up to see us, because they tell the tale that when they were taken onto the Yarmouth, they went down to the mess decks and did a head count. And of course I was missing. At that point, they start mourning. It's like the bereavement for somebody who's not there, all the people not there. They naturally assumed that they may not have survived. So when they realised I'd got out, they were quite eager to come and chat, see if I was all right, you know. I was lucky going back because I was different. People could see the difference in me, and they knew. A lot of the guys that weren't injured and have no visible injury had trouble, and we start seeing post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder being part of the media, and lots of the guys had these issues. And one of the things I am eager to do these days is to help people in that area. And I think that the HMS Ardent association that we formed is one of those key elements that still keeps us together as a unit. It started off as just a group of guys that wanted to have a couple of beers here and there. We had an annual reunion, and we've had one ever since. You only need to meet once a year, have a cuddle with Whacker Payne and a couple of pints of beer, and you're set off for the rest of the year. But knowing that there are people there it helps you. So important these days. It's such a wonderful feeling to be part of it. Later on, when we got back to the UK, I was handed a brown envelope, and in it was what I had in my overalls pockets: my diary, some keys, some stamps, and 67 pence. And I've also got in my little ditty box there a piece of shrapnel that was pulled out of my head some months after the Falklands. So that and the anchor are the only things above the surface at HMS Ardent at the moment. No, we had a fouled anchor in Portland Harbour a few months before we went down south. So you just drop it and leave it there. And it was subsequently peeled back up again a few years ago, and it's now in the National Arboretum as the Ardent Memorial. Yeah. Little reminders. Coming back, we had to get through the inquiry. So we were all in HMS Drake and called forward for interview. During that time, I was going into Stonehouse Hospital every day for physiotherapy to get my hands working again. I still had the middle finger when we came back, but sadly they couldn't save that. That had to be amputated. I was finally discharged from that, and then it was back looking at your career. I got myself promoted, ended up as a commander. So I know that's me. I wanted to carry on in the Navy, and I was pensioned off at the end of it all. There are a couple of things that hinder me. You know, I can't do little things very well. I can't play the flute, but I never could, so it doesn't really matter. And you know, it's there. Sometimes it still hurts like hell, but a little bit of me that says, yeah, you know, I survived. I should still suffer because. Looking back, I think that we weren't particularly well prepared for the amount of devastation that we'd seen. It's one of the things I think about today. Now, if I realised I wasn't that injured, I could turn around and maybe done some better things. Yeah, but it's one of those things that you tend to grapple with yourself all the time. But I don't think we could have saved that ship on that day. Not with what happened. Felt like Clint Eastwood then, don't you?
Yeah, it's strange.